So, good morning, everyone. My name is Ginsel. I'll be your host for today. It's again time for Flash Friday. It's our weekly event that every Friday morning at 9:30 we'll talk about the news in fintech, latest development of the past week, to give you some more background about what's happening in the world and how to make sense of everything that's going on. Of course, I won't be doing that by myself. So I've got Roman with me from Intellias. Welcome, Roman.
Thank you for the introduction, Don. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, so it's really nice to have you on the show this morning. We'll be talking about all kinds of news and really try to explore what the latest developments are in fintech. But first of all, of course, we're curious to learn a little bit more about yourself. Tell us, Roman, you're the head of technology for Intellias. What are you up to with Intellias?
All right, so a few words about myself first. 17 plus years in technology space already. I mean, I did some math just recently, to recap my experience, and 3+ months in the chair of technology office leader at Intellias. We're doing quite well here. We are trying to, what the goal of technology office in the company is basically to make that excellence, or bring it on a higher level and like complete the full services cycle that we offer to our clients, where fintech is one of those, especially those technology things like security, data science, anomaly detection, infrastructure management, especially secure infrastructure management. These are those technology directions that especially support the fintech space. The company is also strong, besides the fintech as a vertical, strong in automotive, in embedded development and other type of engineerings. We have big clients like Here Technologies in our portfolio. Our approach is to close as I said, the full cycle of services to our clients, from ideation to the final implementation. So it's like a worry-free service.
Just to ask you a bit about that, right? So I think you're doing a lot of software development in quite a broad range. But as a head of technology, do you look after the technology stack and basically the semi components that you already have as a development company, so you can have half ready-made products that you can employ for your customers? Or do you look, for example, at DevOps as well?
Well, we have our frameworks. We have frameworks that we can use off the shelf. They available. They are openly, widely available, that we support them. This is just to speed up the engineering process and actually go to market. This is one of the goals. We also rely on the standards and technologies that we also take from the market, implementing the standards like ISO certification that we now following. We also implement other standards to our clients and partners. That's also the thing. So, and of course, we listen to our clients, and if there's a strong need to develop something very custom that might work specifically in that case, we are all for it. So as always, the answer is it depends.
Yeah, okay. And so what kind of cases are you mostly working on in fintech, the fintech space?
So I will do the separation of two things. It's like my personal cases, because it's like 17 years. I touched a lot in that space, and also the cases that Intellias is now working in. So I will start with the company case. So we work with two big banks, and one of those is like a big European bank. You might know the name. It's an Austrian-based enterprise that has a huge presence in Ukraine as well. So interesting thing that we do for this institution is first, that's the security stuff. That's that's penetration testing, validation, anti-social engineering protection. Yeah, that's a very important thing that's worth mentioning, because culture eats strategy to the breakfast. And also worth mentioning that mobile banking, but not the classic mobile banking that might thought like 3 or 4 years ago, but this new kind of mobile banking, like mobile only bank. Now,
okay.
When it comes
complete, so no more omni-channel, but single channel, just mobile.
Just mobile. Yeah, you're right. You're on the spot. And but also we work with one of the biggest banks from Gulf region, like GCC.
Okay.
On the other hand, from my personal experience, I used to work with institutions like BNP Paribas, Raiffeisen Bank. We've been doing lots of services to them, especially security, product design, mobile banking design, and many other things.
So do you see now do you see now an interesting uptake? Because I think if your security is probably one of the key elements that you need to provide in your services or via your services. Do you see that there's an increased demand there at the moment? Because we see that at least the number of cases of fraud and security breaches is very much on the rise during the Corona period. Do you see that that's also one thing that you're being asked for to support the companies you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know why it's happening is because the penetration is growing, the mobile penetration. I know that people think that, okay, we came to like any device we wanted in the past, so we all there. But no, it's still growing as the penetration of devices, of different infrastructure elements is growing. I mean, like now you use your bank on your mobile, your laptop. You hadn't been using this like 3 months ago before the Corona strike. Then it means that the security threat is growing as well. So it's a very parallel process. And unfortunately, sometimes it's even like a non-linear dependency. I mean, you use your services 2 times more often, but the security threats, it's a 5 times more stronger now.
Yeah, and of course, you miss out also on the offline validation of the information that you get. Right. So normally,
exactly.
If you meet someone at the coffee machine, you could always check like, hey, that email that you sent. Right, or that message that you send me, and that validation now doesn't take place. But I can also imagine that it drives demand for solutions that actually fix that. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Are there any interesting developments in that area?
I can tell you one story that we have currently this lots of cases I heard in Ukraine. I believe that's global because I have my friends in Emirates who text me the same things that's happening. So there's those quick money offerings, like get a loan, 1,000 euros loan, just instantly not leaving your house. So what you do is that you have your social security certificate. You take a picture with your phone of that certificate in this app. You send it, and it's good. So imagine that somehow that certificate got lost, or I don't know, any data leak. And so the person they take a picture of that certificate, and then I'm on my name, which is fraud. Like typically it's a transaction fraud, and I'm receiving the text message from a bank. Some institutions is like, oh, okay, it's now that you have a loan like 1,000 euros to pay. So your next payment is 150 next month. And it's like, you can do, of course, you will apply to the police. They will start the investigation, but they will damage your credit score, because what they do is they try to start to terrorize you, saying, okay, if you don't pay, we don't care, was it you or not, we're going to damage your credit score, and so on and so forth. So really, but that's on the one hand. On the other hand, what if I'm a good person and I really need this 1,000 euros, and this is really my social security, and I really need this in 5 minutes. I mean, and I have a good credit score. I mean, I just want to use this app and take it. So, this is that dilemma. So on the other hand, you cannot close the service. On the other hand, you have to do the fraud protection has to be done in a second. So that's the developing trend that we have right now, and really that's like 75% or maybe less, maybe more even, of cases of things that we're dealing with in the security space.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So one, I think it's really interesting to see how this development goes with regard to security and trying to adopt that. I think in any case, we've seen some reports this week where we saw an increase in the challenges that we have with regard to security breaches, and also you see a lot of investment in security-based companies. But if we, for example, look also at some other developments, it's also the hardware-based payments, right? So we've seen, of course, first of all, Apple Pay coming up. Last week, we've been writing about Samsung Pay. And now this week, we're going to write about Huawei Pay. Well, of course, Huawei is an interesting company because this has been under a lot of scrutiny, especially by the US. for being basically tied into the Chinese government too much. But it's still interesting to see, because it's a major player in hardware, how they actually are able to play along with regard to the payment sphere, and how you see not just the big tech firms as the Google, Facebook, and Apple moving in, but also indeed Samsung and Huawei playing along in that game of tapping into payments. What do you think about that?
It's a very interesting question, and actually this topic was actually interesting to me all the time. It's like, why those companies actually going to payment system at all? I mean, why do they do this? And my idea is, my vision as a technologist is because you want to close the cycle of your product cycle. So me being as a product manager, I try to decompose my product, and it's like, okay, I have a marketplace. Like Samsung has their marketplace, Apple of course has their marketplaces, Google has their marketplaces, Amazon has their marketplace. I have my assets that I offer them as a service. So what I need is, and it's enough, is to close the cycle, is I need to have a payment system that I can acquire the money and control the cash flows. So that's why, like, I'm not even mobile operators go there. Like everyone is developing their own payment systems, and that's one thing. It's independencies. Also, if let's say if you're Apple but you're using PayPal to process your transactions and so on, I mean, you start to be dependent on the third party. You cannot define your product vision and your product strategy the way you want. So that's why.
But of course, the return side is that you get pushed with the hardware towards loads of customers, right? So indeed, you are locked in, limited with your possibilities, but at the same time, you've got the world at your feet to a large extent. Like, for example, also that was announced this week is that Google and Apple struck a deal again, that Google will remain the default search engine for Safari. I mean, that you know that if you buy an Apple machine, you will use Safari, and that means that you will use Google, right? So there's a complete lock-in, and even though it will come with concessions, because probably Apple has demands for the way Google does that, or for example, in the way which kind of data is being exchanged around it. But I think it's a really interesting development that definitely is it's an interesting trend, because you see, of course, I think that the access to the internet is now dominated by a few global players. In Asia, still different than from Europe and the US, but I think we'll see some kind of convergence there, as long as we don't go into a really strong separation with regard to East and West trade. But you see that the next level is actually, okay, can we actually tie it into the devices to be one step ahead of even these global digital players, to tie it completely in there? And I think that's really about the fight for the domination of our internet access and everything that we do there.
Yeah, agree. And we had the same cases like Google Maps and Apple devices, which was basically like changed to Apple Maps. And I think that's maybe somewhere like in the basements of Apple's company, they develop their own search engine. But the other thing is also the trust. I mean, will the people trust to Apple search? Like, I don't trust to Apple Maps. I'll be very, very, very honest with you. I'm still using Google Maps, and I'm still watching videos on YouTube. I'm not that tied to iCloud and other stuff. But you know, I mean, some people will do that as well. Do this differently.
No, I think it's really interesting as well. I think what you see is that there's a lot going on around how trust is actually being created. I think we're sort of trying to reinvent that as well, because it's really convenience goes a very long way, and we bend our mind to just trust the one that helps us the best, and that's the nice thing about cognitive dissonance. Right? We as people, we will approve of our own choices afterwards anyway. And then we very much tease to go for the least friction in whatever process we have. And that's already the case where, for example, you might actually think that using an alternative for Google Maps, for example, could be the best option from a privacy perspective. They just have to have just a little bit more friction to completely disregard that option and still go for Google Maps. And I think that's something that you'll see all the time. And one of the worries, of course, is that we will also see people behave similarly around financial services and their financial services data?
Well, I remember my conference that I had in San Francisco. This was in 2012. It was all about the cloud, and I had a panel session with some interested leaders at that time. There was Roman Pavlyuk from Good Data and a few other folks. We were at the stage, and it was 2012. The cloud was just like developing, and they said the name was the Trust and Transparency in the Cloud for Financials and the Retail.
Yeah.
And like most of the enterprises, and we had Macy's, we had Amazon folks, we had different people present in Nordstrom, those US biggest retail marks. They were all at this conference, and then they were mostly saying like, no way, I mean, you kids are playing with this cloud stack, you go with it. And it's like, no way. And then now we have like 8 years behind that event, and they all say cloud, no, there's no other way than just going to the cloud. So this is how trust and transparency changed. And I gave them the example saying like, there's things like pioneers. Some companies, they decide like, okay, we step in it. Like some companies decide, okay, I'm gonna start the mobile bank on like Monobank in Ukraine. It's a subsidiary of Alpha Bank, or Universal Bank, I might be wrong. But what they do is they said, okay, mobile only bank, the brand that only exists in my iPhone. There's no branch. You cannot find any single branch in the whole Ukraine for this. But they did it. Now I'm receiving messages, and we at Intellias receiving requests from other banks like, can you develop something like this for us? This new branding stuff, this mobile only thing that we can take a picture of your social security and stuff like that, and you have and next day we send you the card, your credit card or debit card, and you start playing. So it's like they're pioneers. They had fears. They had doubts doing this or not, but they stepped into. They succeeded with all the risks. Of course, they had fraud attacks, and then the others follow. So somebody in 2012 and 2013 made a step toward that, not only in fintech but also in retail and then other things, and the others will follow. So that's how this works.
Yeah. Cool. It's really challenging. I think there was an interesting report, by the way, this week published called "The Ethics of AI" or the state of the ethics of AI, which I think is really interesting as well. It's a really high debated topic as well between regulators as well as market participants and of course governments that need to come up with new policies. I think you do a lot with data as well, right? So what do you think about that perspective, also given the trust factor we just mentioned?
You see, there's two opposite things. One, so the world demands faster service and faster decision making. Yeah. And so that's why we put lots of AI stuff, machine learning and data science, that we want to eliminate the human from that chain so that the machines are taking decisions themselves. But now will this artificial intelligence will behave the same way as a natural intelligence? Maybe they will take as much time to make this decision as well. And so that's the other thing. Or will it, and also like bringing more kind of I would use like a kind of intelligence, which is artificial one, to the table. It might slow down the processes as well. So that's why, as I said, there's a push for faster, better. Usually it's faster. People are all concerned about the timing and volume. On the other hand, as we bring more solutions, we might actually kill that volume and create more problems. And of course, as I said, this entropy is increasing, this uncertainty, right? It is increasing, and it opens more opportunities for like fraud, attackers, money laundering, and all this stuff like that. And surprisingly, like the story was Wirecard we had, right? Yeah. It's one of the most trusted companies, like all freelancers around the globe. But I spoke to a few of my colleagues from India that I met while I was working in Middle East, and they've been relying so much on that technology to work as a freelancer. They said that our money will be, like in the South Park movie, and it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah. So it's really indeed that's a really but there you see a lot as well. I think that because, for example, we also now, that's also what we will read about this week, is that there's an overreaction, right, as a consequence. So now regulators, well, especially in Germany, but I think more on a global level, will seek stronger regulation and more tighter controls over these kind of companies, which to a certain extent, of course, I fully agree, because we should avoid this happening again. On the other hand, it has nothing to do with technology itself. It could have been any other company that deals with money flows from that perspective, because it just had to do, they had the possibility to, let's say, move away 2 billion virtually without anyone noticing really or seeing it as something significant, which of course is understandable for a company that moves over 100 million right, in money.
I mean, you're right.
100 billion, sorry. So because the amounts are so big, from that perspective, the 2 billion wasn't that much, which of course is still a big shame that it happens like this. But I think we will see quite some pushback from regulators and more scrutiny on payment processors, I think, in the coming period. But I think with relation to AI, for example, so there again, you see that very often now we're having debates actually about not what AI can do or how to regulate AI, but rather which outcomes are we allowed to pursue. So it's actually really about the behavior of the humans again. So for example, it's not per se on how smart your computer is with the data. It's about what are you allowed to feed it, right? So for example, gender or color of your skin or where you live or whether you have health problems or your political choice or your sexual choice, whatever, they just should not be part of the input and therefore not be weighed in the results of whatever you do. And that doesn't only account for financial services, but I think in general, we probably have some really strong opinions about what you can weigh and what you can't. But of course, it's really silly that we think that they won't be taken into account, because already when you work with humans, people have personal preferences that will weigh in any kind of decision-making process in any way, right? And I think the only translation here is that we go from a single one-by-one decision to structural automated decision-making that therefore might have a much larger impact if they are based on the same biases.
You know, it's interesting. We as a data scientists, we want to get as many human properties into the system to actually get more precise results as we can. And of course, when it comes to gender, race, we get our hands itchy to enter them because we might think, we might get something better, some better results. And you know, even more, in many cases, like you said, people themselves, they share that data. And of course, the system takes this into account, does all the processing, and they say, okay, people of that gender do usually this, so they are at higher risk. Because you gave that data to the system. I mean, and that's it. I mean, and they did some correlation. The system might do this wrong. Okay, it doesn't do this wrong. It follows the algorithm that human had created, finally. I mean, that's why I had an interview last week saying, like, what can we do about the gender and race with the technology? I said, nothing. I mean, technology itself it's algorithm. I mean, it does what you tell it to do. I mean, you how you code it. I mean, it has nothing. It's not it has no issues with gender, race, racism, or whatever. I mean, no. I mean, it just has an issue with your algorithm, and of course the culture. And interesting story is, so we invented the payment card, credit card, to what? To not to carry money in our wallet, and if we lost our credit card, it means that we lost a piece of plastic, so we didn't lose our money. And then I'm like, in my community chat that I have, where I live, there's like a couple thousand people that organized, and they put like, okay, I found this credit card on the sidewalk, and the person takes a picture, like, can somebody like tell me if this is yours? I can give you tell me your number or whatever, like on the back. It's like, usually it's like one number is hidden, or even though the card is not, it's taking picture as is. It's like, tell me the name, I'll show me your ID, and I will send it to you, or like we'll bring it to your house. It's like is it like a goodwill, or this good Samaritan. But in fact, I'm saying, like, look, if you found a plastic card, destroy it. or like give it to police or destroy it. I mean, because this is the purpose. If it's lost, it's gone. The plastic, it turns into plastic. We developed that technology for this purpose.
That's probably better than to share that data with a larger group of people that you're not so familiar with.
Exactly. I mean, so the good thing is it's called education. I think we, as a fintech specialist, we have to educate more our consumers. And I read it.
It's hard because it's really complex to really understand everything that's going on. And I think that's really also, for example, also probably, and I'm going to challenge you here a little bit, also for you as a real technologist, you have to rely on certain things that you do not fully understand, like, for example, exactly how a chip works, that you have to assume it just does what you want it to do, right? You can't go throughout up to a hardware level to understand everything perfectly. And of course, this is also where some certain distrust sometimes comes from, because people sometimes are uncomfortable with not knowing exactly how it works. And that's, of course, what we have to deal with in technology.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the trends of upcoming trends. And I read the report from EBA, European Bank Authority. So one of the recommendations they made, this was released in probably like this week on Monday.
I think you mean their response to the open call from the EU for the digital finance policy.
Exactly. And I said like,
they submitted their response to that.
And education is one of the first things that consumer education. So educate your consumers how to deal with financial tools, institutions, and assets, and so on and so forth, so that it gets much better. So they use those in much better way. So this is that example, right? So even the credit card is thing that exists like 40+ years, but still people don't realize quite well how to deal with it. So I'm not even talking for more complex things like mobile banking or whatever.
No, I think that's definitely, and that's also something that we really stand for. Is it's all about education, both on the technology side as well as on the finance side, because both are artificially complex worlds that we need to somehow simplify so people can cope with the threats that come from it potentially, and really make proper use of the opportunities that arise from it. What's interesting in that level, I think, is also the continuous evolution of insurance, right? So I see, for example, this week we saw that Lemonade is planning to do an IPO in the stock markets that still seem to be going up and up, like there is no corona. We saw, for example, that Oscar is fundraising for health insurance. So it's really interesting to see that there's actually still quite some development on the insurance level, which of course also increasingly relates or thrives based on artificial intelligence and automated decision-making models to validate risks and manage their portfolio. I think it's interesting to see how these companies and the insurance market is developing there as well. Do you have any experience in that field?
So not personally, but I know that banking and generally fintech is tightly integrated with insurance markets. So at Intellias we've been following that direction as well. I have a personal experience in my past work with my past employer. I've been dealing with more like health insurance stuff in United States, but this is health insurance in the United States is a very specific domain. So sometimes I'm not even considered this as a part of a fintech, to be very honest, because it's a so specially designed for that system. But anyway, the laws, I speak about like financial laws and mathematical things are kind of the same as a general insurance market as well. So it's like, but the only regulations and standards are very specific for the domain.
Yeah, true. I think we already have to wrap it up, Roman. We're already at the end of our half hour. There's still, of course, much more news that we could discuss, but if you would like to learn more about that, please read our newsletter that goes out this afternoon to read up on all the news and the background and research reports. For now, Roman, I'd really like to thank you for your insights and joining us in this morning's call.
Thank you, Don, and my pleasure to be here. And thank you for the nice topics that you brought. And these are very important things to keep working on.
No, definitely. Looking forward to keep on working with you as well as one of our members. Looking forward to catching everyone soon. So for everyone who was listening, enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. Hopefully talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.